Recording in progress.
Go ahead and call the meeting to order. We'll just start with a roll call. McKee here. Schultz here. Adama here. Behrenkamp
Here.
Nichols here. Perfect. Next we'll go on to the Pledge of Allegiance. If you would stand and join me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Agenda approval. Anything from staff?
Thank you, Mayor. No changes from staff at this time.
Anything from council?
No.
Okay, then I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Commission representatives, we have Dean Jacobs from Planning and Sharon Meister for Parks and Trails. Right?
Yes, and they are joining us virtually.
Sounds good. And open forum for items not on tonight's agenda, and Jessica will walk us through that.
Perfect. Thank you for Mayor and Council. Anyone who wants to speak on open forum, you can submit a comment card to us. We have not received any, Mayor, but anyone joining us virtually can press *9 if you're on the phone, or you can press the reactions tab and then raise your hand. Mayor, at this time, no one is raising their hand.
Okay, give it just a couple seconds. Still nothing?
Still not.
Perfect.
I think we're good to go.
All right, then we will go, right, we don't have any presentations, so we will go on to the consent agenda consisting of items 7A through 7F. Is there anything council wanted to pull? No. Okay, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion to approve consent agenda items 7A through 7F.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Perfect. On to 8, which is a public hearing for certifying delinquent fees to Hennepin County. And Jessica will lead us.
Thank you, Mayor. Annually, we go ahead and send out bills for different city services, and if people do not pay, we will go ahead and start the assessment process. This year, we currently have assessments for dust control and recycling. We have received some payments since the packet went out, so our assessment amounts are slightly less, and we do accept payment through November 15th under state statute. So we will have a slightly lower amount that we'd certify right now. We're looking at about $2,500 for delinquent recycling and about $3,500 for dust control, but we have a few more days for folks to pay, so that could be lowered. So the resolution does allow for staff to make those edits as as payments come in. But with that, we'd ask that council go ahead and open a public hearing, take any comment from those who are potentially assessed, and then close the public hearing, and then certify the assessment rolls.
Sounds good. Perfect, thank you. So let's go ahead and open the public hearing. I don't know if anyone's here for that. They are. Now's your shot.
Sure. If anyone's here in person, you can come up to the podium, state your name and address. If you're joining us electronically, you can go ahead and raise your hand by pressing *9 or click reactions, and then raise your hand, and we'll recognize you, and again, state name and address for the record. We don't have anyone in person, and currently no one is raising their hand virtually. I would note from past experience, there have been times we have had very few people comment, so.
Gotcha.
Just know that that's.
Sounds good. Well, then I'll go ahead and make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
So then on to the actual certification of those fees. Can we do that all, first of all?
The tea is done.
What is
I
that?
am not sure what that noise.
Very high-pitched whistling for those that
Somebody's got
can't
a
hear
pocket full
online.
of crickets.
Can we do those in one?
We could do those in one motion as long as
Everyone
we're
okay with that?
approving both.
Yes.
resolutions.
No, let's go address by address.
You can go ahead and lead that one.
Yeah. I make a motion, we certify all of them at the same time.
Resolution 2021 or 124 and 125?
Yes.
Second.
Any further discussion?
I just have a quick question for
Yeah.
staff. So, how are these amounts in comparison to what we've seen in previous years? Are we seeing a trend going up or down?
I would say that we're pretty consistent with what the amount is. There's usually 5 to 10% that get certified annually. It varies a little bit, but this is very similar to what we've seen in the past. We have implemented over the last few years, sending a couple additional letters to make sure people know that there are outstanding charges. Occasionally, with Randy's in particular, folks think that they have paid it with their trash bill, so we try to do some proactive things with folks to make sure that they know that they do have those charges as well.
Thank you. No other questions?
Okay. All those? I believe we
Very
did.
camp.
I seconded.
Oh, Nichols, okay.
And there's nothing else on that, so all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Perfect. Next up, we have public comment opportunity for 9A, B, C, and D, which is garages to PUD amendment for Tavera, camping policy and sign ordinance update. And Jessica, if you want.
Thank you, Mayor. Anyone, we have not received any public comment cards for anyone in person commenting on those, but anyone joining us virtually, if you'd like to press *9 if you're on a phone, or click the reactions button and raise your hand, we can recognize you to speak on any of those 3 planning. Mayor, at this time, no one is raising their hand.
Okay. Then we'll go right into 9A.
And we have Kendra joining us.
Yes,
joining us.
thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. Jess, you have my slides?
Yes, I'm pulling them up just 1 second here. Apologize. They were. Okay.
So this is the rezoning site plan, conditional use permit, variance, and preliminary plat for garages 2. And I don't know if you can see the screen. I can't see the screen.
1 second, Kendra.
Oh, that's not what we want to do. Kendra, can you,
I
Kendra, can
cannot.
you see it now?
I cannot.
Okay, give us just a second. We've got it here electronically. I'm not sure why it's.
Okay, well, I will,
If you want to tell, we can see it here. I will work on getting it, so we're.
yeah, I
can see it on
will
your
just
screen.
walk through it. I don't have, if I recall, I don't have a lot of slides, so I will start to walk through it. And if I skip something, my apologies, Mr. Mayor, but I'll do my best to kind of follow along there. So tonight it is the item for garages 2. They have several items. As I mentioned, the site, there should be an aerial that shows the site includes 2 existing parcels. The rectangular parcel is the site where the development would occur. The sort of oddly shaped parcel to the northeast of that is a residential parcel. And as part of the applicant's effort to address neighborhood concerns, they are proposing to adjust that lot line between his industrial proposal and the existing residential home to give that homeowner a little bit more land. The homeowners directly to the north of this project have submitted letters of support for the project, which are in your packet. The next slide is the 2040 land use map, and it's hard to see on this aerial, but there was a little confusion at the Planning Commission, so I want to be clear that the property is guided light industrial. It has been light industrial on the last 3 comprehensive plans, so at least 20 years it's been guided light industrial. And the next slide is the zoning map, I believe, which is the showing the property as urban reserve, which is a holding zone. That's a holding zone that the city applies to any land where sewer and water is not currently available. And when sewer and water becomes available, we would rezone the property to the zoning district compatible with the underlying land use. And so in this case, that would be a rezoning to the industrial zoning district. That is the applicant's request. The mini storage building would be on that new industrial lot that would re-guide from urban reserve, as I said, to light industrial. The home lot, which is guided low-density residential, would remain urban reserve. Again, sewer and water is not available. There's no development proposed on that lot. So that would simply increase the lot size for what is referred to as Lot 2. Just background, the concept plan was reviewed by the council in March. The Planning Commission held a public hearing in August and voted 3-2 to recommend denial, based on their finding that the development water. The council tabled this item to allow the applicant to work with staff to address stormwater issues, as stormwater issues were a significant item raised at the Planning Commission meeting. And the applicant has done that. I'll just show a couple of images. This is the site plan that shows the development site, and the green area is the land that would be given by the industrial developer to the resident that lives next door. So the residential lot gets a little bit bigger. The next slide just gives you a sense of where the pond is located, so that pond will straddle that lot line. And it's a pond system, so you can see there's 2 ponds that are proposed, excuse me, on the northeast portion of the industrial site. And then 4 industrial buildings. The doors would face away from the existing residential homes and are designed to comply with our code requirements for this district. There's an image of the architecture, which is lap siding and some stone intended to provide a residential character. Landscaping that's provided both on this property and on the adjacent properties. Again, those are the landowners the applicant worked with, and they authorized him to provide additional landscaping on their property to the north. The access, there is no access to Horseshoe from the industrial project. All access would come from Highway 55 along that existing driveway. The applicant has worked with MnDOT and is working with Medina to get any permits required from that city. So you can see that there's a long driveway between this property and Highway 55. And staff has included conditions to ensure that's a temporary condition. I hope you're on the screen with the Southwest District
Yes,
Plan,
we are.
which shows a future frontage road. And so we've included conditions that if and when that road gets built, the access to 55 for this development would be eliminated, and that property would have access through this new frontage road to Highway 55. Stormwater will be managed on site. There is the filtration basin. The city engineer has been working with the applicant to ensure that all state watershed and local regulations will be met. And the plans with the conditions attached would comply with those regulations. The concept, oh, now I see it. The site plan shows those ponds. And then the last slide is the recommendation. The council has 2 options. Staff continues to recommend approval of the request as we did at the Planning Commission, and there are 5 items that would require action. However, the Planning Commission, as I said, did recommend 3-2 to deny the request. And so the second option is to adopt resolution denying the request as recommended by the Planning Commission. Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to answer any questions, and I know the engineer, Public Works Director, excuse me, is available as well. So,
Perfect, thank you. Any questions to start us off for Kendra, or?
Yeah, I have a question for Kendra. Can I ask?
Yep, absolutely.
Where's the entrance going to be? You've mentioned the entrance will be X today, and then once something happens, then we'll be getting a new entrance. Can you talk about that again?
sure, the access to this mini storage project, if approved, would follow the existing driveway, which is an access off of Highway 55.
Yep.
That crosses north to this site. If the city ultimately builds the frontage road, which would connect Pioneer Trail to Rolling Hills Road, that would be about halfway between, well, not quite, about just south of this project, north of Highway 55. And when that road's constructed, this applicant would no longer be allowed to cross that road to access 55. They would have to use the frontage road for access, and then they would come out either to Pioneer Trail or Rolling Hills Road. And
Okay.
it looks like Jess has the image up on the screen.
Essentially, until whatever time that is, they'd just be using the long driveway that's set in place.
That is correct. That's a long-term, that's correct.
Okay. Fair enough, thank you.
Anyone else?
Mr. Mayor, I've got a couple of questions.
Go for it.
Number one, I was one of the people on the planning commission that voted to recommend not approving. And Kendra, you were cutting out when you said the reason was that it was premature, or what was our reason for recommending no to this development?
Yes, Councilmember Van Camp, the recommendation from the Planning Commission was that they found that the variance standards for the variance from the municipal services were not met, and that the development was premature without municipal sewer and water.
Okay, so I was one of those, is it okay that now that I'm on the council, I can say different things? Am I all right with that? I don't want to mess things up. So the way I understand it, they do not need city water or city sewer. Is that correct?
They don't need it, they don't need that for this project, that's correct.
Right. What's coming before us tonight and a little bit later might change some things. While I understand the access will change once this area is developed, I still am concerned about Highway 55 and that intersection not having right turn lanes into that driveway or a left turn lane if you were heading east on 55 into that. I'm concerned about traffic on Highway 55, no matter how temporary it is or how long-term it is, if that makes sense. You were saying that they were in conversation still with the state on that access, or I think when I was on the planning commission, we were told that the state had no concern and that driveway could be used to access this site without any changes to Highway 55.
That is correct. There's a MnDOT letter in your packet dated May 25th, and they have no requirements for any improvements to Highway 55 for this mini storage project. Any change to that access would require, at 55, would require an access permit, as would any grading within that MnDOT right-of-way. But MnDOT is not requiring any improvements to 55 for this project. However, what is a little hard to see maybe is where that driveway hits Highway 55 is actually in the city of Medina. And so we've reached out to Medina, both staff and the applicant, to say, hey, this is happening. Do you have any permitting requirements when they upgrade that driveway? And so we've just included that as a condition, that any permits from Medina are the applicant's responsibility. But that would just be the driveway on their property, not
Yeah.
on Highway 55.
That's probably my biggest concern. The next one is almost just as much. The folks on Horseshoe Trail, is that correct? The residents on that trail, they were talking about drainage issues, those kind of things. Looking at this design and all of the plans, all this water that's going to come off of this facility's roofs and the parking area and such are all going to the initial sediment pond and then into the next pond. And then where does it run from that second pond to the north? Does it travel south to 55, or is it going to end up going through that residence property or down between the borders of those two residents down in the Horseshoe Trail? Because if I remember all of the conversations in the public hearing, those residents were extremely concerned about the water runoff. And it's a pretty good grade change from this development if it were to go through down to their neighborhood in Horseshoe Trail, so.
The existing drainage patterns will be maintained, but I think Public Works Director Mattson could maybe provide more detail, as his team has been working with the applicant over the last couple of months to review the stormwater.
I'm pulling up a slide for, Kent has some information for you. Give me just.
Or, I'm sorry, Kent, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'll take this now. So I prepared this slide today for identifying the culverts that are involved downstream of the project. So the green is in the project, that's a single family home. There was some discussion as part of the project that applicant would have the driveway redone. And as we were out there with residents, that's a pinch point for the drainage. Drainage comes down the hill right now and jumps the road and goes to the north side. So that happens today. So green is in the project. If we improve green, then you go down the south side of the road and you have 3 other yellow culverts. Then you have the orange culvert, which I put orange, so it's a city street. You go over to another yellow private driveway, and then you cross under Rolling Hills Road. So this was the work that we had the applicant do in addition to their site.
Right, okay.
We said with the neighborhood input, and there were neighborhood meetings, and we walked it, and council members were out there, and the mayor was out there. It's a little messy, but to anybody listening, that's the process. We let everybody know what's going on, and we heard what happens to drainage in the neighborhood. So again, we asked the applicant to do more work off-site, which we have done with other developers, and they came back with an analysis. So the analysis says that the storms jump the road now, and there's some low wet areas now. So we took another look at it just to see what the impact of the additional blacktop is. Let's call it roofs and blacktop. So what that analysis shows, that in this whole watershed to the low areas, because north of Horseshoe Bend also drains to that Rolling Hills Road,
Okay.
I wrote the report that it's not significant. It's wet now, it's low now, it'll add a little bit of water, but this system will pass it. So on the calculation side, it's not that significant, this amount of blacktop going to a low wet area. If we wanted to improve it, you'll notice we're dealing with public right-of-way. So then it's a city project. The developer would be responsible for the green dot that's within their project. But the drainage is getting to a city public right-of-way that has low areas now, and it's built in the 70s. This isn't unusual. Corcoran has these. We just went through it at Corcoran Trail West and looked at the drainage there as part of a public project. So it's not unusual in the city to run across these kinds of neighborhoods. And the reason this one comes up is that a developer is draining towards it. So it's been looked at. We understand the neighborhood system. We heard the neighbors. And I wrote it for, it's not that significant to the existing system right now.
A lot of that water that's gonna come off those impervious, the roof and the tar is gonna end up in kind of a more of a controlled runoff running through those two ponds than just falling on the ground and snowballing, I'm sorry, it's that time of year, but snowballing down the hill to those culverts and into that neighborhood.
Yeah, and I use the analogy of the bathtub. The drain at the bottom of the bathtub's not changing. Water's
Right.
coming out, coming down the hill at the same rate.
Right.
There'll be a little more water in the bathtub, so it'll run a little longer. It
Okay.
gets to a public system, and these people take good care of their ditches, they like to mow them. So we heard that, and there'll be a little more water in that system, but it does pass it.
If there's a problem, the recommendation is they call the city public works once this is done, and we'll just keep an eye on it kind of deal is what.
And we'll go back to Kevin and
Okay.
do we want to bring the city project forward? And the developer could be conditioned to do part of that, the green dots within their development.
Okay.
So, right now, the green dots, nothing's going to happen to it because we affect other culverts. You can't improve your own project and then just let the water go downhill.
Okay.
So it's all one project, I guess, for this downhill system.
That's all I've got. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Of course. Do you have something?
Well, to piggyback on, Kent, when you're saying if it would become a city project in the future to improve that street drainage, are we looking at reshaping ditches and adding size to those culverts?
Correct. And that hasn't been designed yet. So if you enlarge the green dot, then you enlarge the yellow one. Make sure, and we call it the 10-year event. A municipal standard is a 10-year event to keep it in the ditches, keep it off the road tops. Right now, the 10-year event goes over the road. So it goes through backyards on the north side. So we would do a project to bring it up to today's standard, keep the 10-year on the south end, south side of the road.
But we're not recommending that as part of this, or that's something future?
That would be
possibly?
future, and then funding would have to be figured out.
Would we be able to do something like that without improving the road surface?
Maybe. You could do driveway culverts and maybe a larger culvert at Horseshoe Bend, but then you should do you could do driveway culverts and ditches.
Okay,
So I'm not saying Horseshoe Bend Trail needs to be torn up.
right.
I'm not saying Rolling Hills Road needs to be torn up. You might have culvert crossings that are bigger.
Okay. That's my only real question with regards to the water drainage. I mean, you had a good analogy about you can't change the size of the flow from it, so, and that's state or law, so we've seen that time and time before with many projects. We don't have an idea of sense of what the cost of like a city improvement would be just to redo culverts and re-ditching, do we?
I got a ballpark from Brad, but you probably know better.
I haven't ballparked it out, so we.
Just a ballpark that Brad gave me was like somewhere in the 50 to 80,000.
Oh, okay.
So seemed like not as bad of a number as I guess I thought
Yeah.
it would have been. And I'd be in favor of, looking at, I don't know if maybe we'd start with a feasibility study or something to try to get some more details on that and eventually we're gonna need to address some of that flow, I would think. It's pretty bad if you've been out there. It definitely can create some issues, just separate from this project, just the situation that it is. So I'd be in favor of looking at how we can improve that a little bit. But yeah.
There is a, Mr. Mayor, there's a business, an existing business that operated out of the site already, prior to the sale. Was that officially a small business, or was it an unofficial small business? Does anybody know the answer to that question?
Kendra, do you know that one? What was happening on the site before?
I am not certain. I do know it was in place before we adopted our home occupation ordinance. I can look and see if I've got that in my files while we're talking.
I know 100% for sure that there is a business there, because that's where I got my bottom of for Corcoran signs. So, I'm just asking about, we have concerns about traffic. One of the concerns, I guess, in thinking about things, if there is already a business there and we're adding a business, are some of those concerns sort of muted by the fact that there already was a business and we didn't have all these existing problems with traffic and all that kind of stuff? I'm just thinking aloud. You guys should all know that there already was a business there.
Good to know.
They did good work. They got me elected twice.
I'll refrain from questioning whether.
I'm not sure if that was good work. How's that?
I'll refrain, but Dean will just.
I got one dig in.
Ouch. Ouch, ouch.
I'm sorry.
Well, they left
I'm
town.
sorry if I was.
I don't know.
That is interesting to note, though, that this is, I think, a pretty low traffic business, and I'd assume that probably was too, but, might mitigate a little bit of the difference even more if there was already something there that someone was pulling into.
Yeah, I would think.
I mean, I've driven by their facility in Otsego, I don't know how many times, and the last time I was by there was one vehicle there.
Yeah.
It mostly looks like a closed-up building,
Right.
so. And with the restrictions that they have on hours and whatnot, it's gonna be pretty well contained, I would think, how many people come and visit at any given time. It's pretty restrictive for having a storage facility. It's not like having a personal storage facility when someone can come in and out as they please any given hour of the night.
Right.
One thing I did see in here, I had a question on, is with the addition of a keyed access gate, they're putting a turnaround on the driveway at the gate. Is that turnaround sufficient enough to turn a vehicle around that's pulling a trailer? Is that something that's been looked at?
I don't remember staff discussing. We can look at it.
Kendra, do you have any?
Yeah, I think we don't know enough about that. We do have a condition, though, that driveway design needs to be reviewed and approved by engineering. So I don't think I can say that today, but that is certainly something we're aware of on this site. And I can also confirm, I was slow to answer that question because I was confirming that we did issue a home occupation license for the former property owner on this site. So that was an authorized business on this property.
No?
Sure.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
I'm also scrolling through Google Maps here, and it looks like there are about 5 other home accesses within about a half a mile that go straight onto 55. I believe we've been told in the past that each home we should count on about 10 trips per day. So there's a considerable amount of residential traffic already entering straight onto 55. So I'm not sure that this would be a significant increase versus the existing risk level in that area.
Gotcha.
Mr. Mayor, so are we on to the discussion portion, or are we talking to Kendra and asking Kent and Kendra questions?
If you have anything more for them, you can ask, otherwise let's.
Because I had a lot of concerns with this initially, even, I don't know if it's prior to even the planning commission meeting, but there is no control at the access. There didn't seem to be a system for controlling access or lights or whatever. So we had a long discussion about that, and that it's impacted the neighbors and the sightlines and that kind of stuff. So I will say, from the time that the planning commission saw it and when we've seen it, I was at that meeting, planning commission meeting too.
Yeah.
There has been significant upgrades in a lot of things. So you kind of take the planning commission with a grain of salt, because a lot has changed on the application since we last saw it. It doesn't mean that we automatically poo-poo it, but plenty of things have been upgraded in the application.
I'd agree. I'd say both upgraded and just there was a lot of questions, I think, that we're just uncertain about one way or the other that have been more explained and we have more detail on. Helps.
Mr. Mayor, too, in the past, in the planning commissions that I've been part of over the last year and whatever, there was many conversations had by us that we wish we had more complete information like this to make
Right.
a better deal. It was like some of the information or the packet information we were getting was premature. This has changed my mindset considerably, and I think it would do the same on the planning commission. I was gonna ask the question tonight, should this go back to the planning commission for them to look at just as a safety deal, but I don't know if it's, the timing and stuff would allow that, so.
Yeah, probably would be tight,
Yeah,
but
it's great to see this much information.
yeah, definitely.
And I think we could make a lot more, the planning commissioners could make a lot cleaner recommendation
Right.
and such than what we did at that time.
Has it been through watershed yet, Kevin?
Kevin's addressing.
No, sorry, Mayor, to answer that question, it has not. We require that it gets to a certain point through our engineering process before we will release that, so that would be one of the next steps.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
I have a question for staff.
Go ahead.
I think I read in there that fire suppression is not needed if the building is under 12,000 square feet. But when you look at like the Bs and the Cs, they show the square footage under 12,000, but combined that are over. Is there some type of fire break in there? That's what the reasoning is?
I think there was a firewall.
Yes, there is. I don't know exactly, but that was the discussion, was there's a fire break in between the building.
Okay.
I don't know exactly where it falls, but so it breaks it up under 12,000 on each side.
And do they have some type of water hookup in there? So do they set up with a dry sprinkler system so that if a fire truck comes up, it can hook up to it?
No,
No, they're just all hose?
yes.
Okay. But there is requirement that no flammable liquids of any kind stored in the facility, right? So, okay.
Yes.
I'm trying to find the page that had the map with the firewalls on there.
Yeah, I think you can see it in just about every building.
Got
There's
it.
like kind of a line,
Yep.
but it wasn't clear.
Gotcha.
I have one more question, Mr. Mayor. I think we talked about it in the planning commission, automobile storage, those kind of things. Is that going to be allowed? Is that considered storing gas or diesel in those buildings then and such? Or was this just all storage? I'm trying to remember, the gentleman spent a lot of time talking about those kind of things.
I'm trying to remember too.
Yeah, Kendra, do you recall?
Yeah, you can store a vehicle in here. You cannot repair a vehicle or have any
That's right.
activities related to that. But certainly you could park your convertible in there for the winter if you chose.
Okay.
Is there any type of security monitoring on the building? Do we know that?
I believe it was, and maybe the applicant
Yep.
wants to speak to it.
Yeah, feel free to come to the mic and if you could give us your name for the minutes, that'd be great.
Hello, I'm Chris Scherber. On our other buildings, we have cameras, and they have like a basically it's motion sensor activated, so we get alerts on our phone. And also it's gonna be gated with the security system that way.
Yeah, I guess what I was wondering is then how, if you're gonna have cameras, how often are those cameras monitored? You know, there was some concern with the planning commission about not having like bathrooms in there and whatnot. Maybe, you know, people urinating behind the building. Is that something that's gonna be able to be monitored by those cameras?
Yeah, so basically every time the camera sees someone, it gives me an alert on my phone. My phone, I mean, with all 3 buildings that we have, dings quite a bit, but it's enough to where I look at that right away. I think we were also talking about adding my dad on there, but he's not as technologically savvy, so I'm gonna have to help him with that, but, I mean, really, the ding on your phone is pretty loud. I wake up at night, so.
But you have the ability to monitor that kind of situation, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And we haven't really had too much trouble with that. I mean, that first year, when you're renting out, you kind of have to filter through people, and you find out who you want there and who you don't want there. But the lease is kind of favored on our end so that we don't have stuff that's gonna make our neighbors unhappy and cause trouble with you guys.
Do we have a copy of the lease? Did we get that ever?
Yes, we
Okay.
do. I think it was in
Yes,
the
I
packet,
believe it's.
wasn't it?
Yeah, it was in the packet.
Okay, fair enough, yeah.
That was my only question.
Yeah.
Perfect, thank you. Oh,
Are you limiting access hours, or is it open 24/7?
No, I believe it's daylight hours. What do we? 7 to 9.
7 AM to 9 PM?
Yeah.
So you'll know if somebody's there after 9 PM? Do they have to key out? How do you know they're leaving?
So they do have to, on the system, gate systems we've looked up, they have to press the button to key out. And that garage door button is keyed to so whoever that person is, it's a garage door opener, basically.
Yeah.
So we'll know who's left, who's come in, and whether they left again.
Through the main gate?
Yeah.
Okay. So you'll be able to monitor if somebody's there after the allotted time, so you can have discussions with them
Yeah.
to curtail that.
I mean, we are looking at other gates, but that seems to be the best one right now, where it actually shows you everything that's going on.
Okay.
So,
Because I'm sure that if we get a complaint, that's probably going to be one of them.
yeah. So,
All right.
Perfect, thank you.
Thanks.
I had a quick question, and I'm
Sure.
not sure who's best to address this.
Sure.
If we were to eventually look at something on the city side in terms of addressing some of the drainage issues there,
Sure.
and we were looking at conditioning the applicant to address the green on that map on the project site,
Yep.
would that be something that would need to be included in any approval now? Any language there, or?
That's a great question. Kendra, would you consider us needing a condition for that if we were to move forward with a project like that?
For a future improvement that the city makes and assess it back to this landowner, this developer?
Yeah.
Is that the question?
No, I don't think we talked about assessing.
Maybe not
Thinking about-
necessarily
are you thinking
assessing,
just
but.
the one culvert?
Yeah, the
But
one on the map that
if we
was
were
on
to
their
do a
project.
project, would we have this property owner be part of it, is what
Right.
you're getting at. And I
Yep,
think
the one on their
um,
actual property.
I don't know, Kendra, maybe you can speak to whether or not we'd need to include it in this. But otherwise, if we were to do any other city project, we could have them be at the table if it was not conditioned in this. Is that correct, Kendra?
I think Kevin's had more conversations. I think in general, if if an improvement is required to serve this project, you would make it a condition of this. And we don't believe improvements on that green dot are required for this project. However, if there is a future project, certainly the city can assess adjacent landowners. I don't know if we could include a condition on this if we don't believe an improvement is required today. Kevin and Kent, did you guys talk about that?
Yeah, I can jump in. I think we worded the engineering memo to basically create a, more or less a placeholder, so it really depends, the question comes down to timing. If we did a project where we started evaluating it and we were gonna commit to a project next year, I think at time of final plat, we created a placeholder language that said you might be subject to improving that. Excuse me, if we waited 5 years and the plat was approved, our window of opportunity would go away. So it's really dependent on how and when we execute a larger project, is my understanding.
And that's included in the,
Today, we only have there is, Kevin, so we did put in language related to potential of an off-site project in that resolution.
Isn't there
Well,
already
the resolution references the engineering memo and the conditions in the engineering memo, and that's where it highlights that conversation and that what I would label placeholder exists. So I believe it's in there via the engineering memo. The window where that goes away is, again, if we don't have a decision made on a project, when final plat comes in, we would have to set the final plat conditions. So we have a limited window to make a decision on the larger project if we wanted to make that improvement with this development, if that makes sense.
gotcha.
Otherwise, we could always do it separately 5 years later, and however we manage that project, you know, this would be a individual landowner like everyone else, so there's more conversations about how that project gets executed.
Right.
But there is an advantage to potentially doing it earlier by absorbing one driveway.
So that, is it safe to say that there's already a problem if the runoff is going over the road and into
I think so.
backyards and
Yeah.
where, I mean, I guess we got a lot of wetlands here, so sometimes it's hard to say, well, you built your house on a wetland and that wetland was there before your house, or is the wetland that's in your backyard whenever it rains, is that a naturally occurring wetland that you just happen to have your house on? Or is it a wetland that is a byproduct of the impervious surfaces around you? Because it seems like regardless of whether we proceed with this project or not, there's an existing issue that we as council need to decide whether it's an issue worth addressing. We happen to have it in front of us. We happen to have people complaining about this project impacting the existing condition, but it sounds like the existing condition already sucks for the landowners.
Oh.
So then, I think it would be, since they have a project that would help offset some of the payment, because I don't think we can say, update that green culvert or whatever, without addressing the system
Right.
downhill, because
Yep.
then they'll just have tons and tons of water.
Right.
Or do we use it as an opportunity to address the system? I don't know, Kevin, is this backyard flooding and issues with the water going over the road a product of misplacement of houses on wetlands, or is it a product of in a situation that's been exasperated by conditions outside of the wetlands that we have in Corcoran? Or are you not able to answer that today?
I can answer it, you know, at a high general level. Is when these developments were built back in the day, it's really hard to pinpoint exactly one thing that is the cause. It's a combination of how developments were done and what level of oversight. The rules back then were, you know, close to 50 years ago, were a lot different than they are today. The timing of the development and the, you know, the monitoring of how it all went in can play a factor. We're getting more rain than we did 70 years ago. And so a lot of that, it's not a unique situation, as Kent alluded to. for older neighborhoods, 50-plus years, to have some sort of existing drainage issue. So it's really probably, I can probably tell you it's not one problem that led to this, but it is, it does not meet today's standards, and, that's what the memo recognizes. So there is a warrant for, a future project, whether it's now or later. If we were to do a project in this neighborhood, we'd bring it up, as, hey, is this something we want to address with the project at that time? So, again, we have a pretty limited stormwater budget in Corcoran, so that's why it's kind of more reactive to when there's conversations than proactive. So hopefully that addressed your question a little bit.
It does. So sometimes as neighbors, we wish that things wouldn't happen. I always point to when I had to vote for the development in my own, literally in my own backyard on my property line, that I didn't want to see, but I didn't really have the right to say you can't build houses because I want to have open space, or if a place is designated as a light industrial, or if it's zoned a certain way, it's hard to say, no, you can't put a light industrial project in there because people may not like it. So we try to mitigate, I think, we want to try to mitigate as best as we can to the people around us. And I feel like it's a situation where we can, it's hard to not sympathize and empathize with the neighborhood behind it, but it's also sort of within the rights of the landowner to do certain things. But if we can take this opportunity and take the big picture and look and say, hey, this is going to impact, the road might cross the road for 2 days after the storm tonight or whatever. Mm-hmm. And then if they have all this impervious surface, it might be 4 days. There's no doubt that this will add to the existing problem, and if we've identified an existing problem and we can offset the cost, I don't like to spend money, but sometimes even within limited government, we still have to drain and have standards for drainage.
Yeah.
So I think one thing that we ought to consider is upgrading the drainage to the neighborhood as we do this project, but
Absolutely.
that's just me.
I 100% agree.
May I ask a clarifying question on that and a follow-up?
Sure.
So are we talking about the applicant only potentially improving the green culvert? That would only be within their scope of purview?
Yes.
Within their plat is the language we have used.
So
So that's the green dot.
So let me ask you this then. If we ask the applicant to improve the green dot, to keep the water on the south side, would that potentially create issues for the residents on the south side due to the poor drainage on the south side?
Yes, those other yellow dots then would presumably need to be enlarged.
So if we ask for an improvement now as part of the project, we're basically have to commit as a city to improve the rest of it.
Right. And I think that's a little bit what Kevin was talking about with the language in the engineering memo, that it kind of gives the.
But that's all on us, the yellows
Right.
And the
Yep.
oranges.
and the oranges.
Yep. But it would give us time that if we did a project in, the relative short term, after this, we could condition that green be done by the applicant. If it was, something we did in 6 years, then probably not.
Right, so knowing that the water volume may increase, but the rate of flow won't increase. It's not like we're pushing more water quicker. It's just like you said, it's just gonna take longer for that water to flow through.
Mayor, may I make a suggestion that might clarify?
Yeah, that'd be great.
My suggestion would be, if the council is considering a stormwater project in conjunction with this, that the time between this decision tonight and the final plat, that we bring back a proposal that would do as small a feasibility study as we could do to get firm answers and costs, that we kind of parallel that with any potential final plat application they have. So at final plat, we'd have a lot of information to execute, whether we're going to do a larger project or not at this time.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense to me. Any other big questions or concerns?
I think this is a good approach. I mean, having been out there and talked to some of the residents, it sounds like it's been a longstanding issue, as everybody's pointed out. I know that the guy on the corner mentioned his yard is usually flooded in spring for a period of a couple months, and up on Rolling Hills Road as well. So if there's something we can do as part of this or in parallel with this to deal with those endemic problems, I think it would be a good opportunity to take advantage of. I think it also speaks to the need to proceed with Kevin's suggestion earlier this year at our goal-setting session to look at a stormwater fee to build up funds to deal with these kinds of problems as they come up, so that it can be just part of the regular consideration that we make as projects are considered. If there's going to be downstream impacts, we can look at those and take opportunities with funding that's already been allocated from development projects to deal with those downstream issues.
Mayor, Dean Jacobs sent a message and would like to be
Sure,
recognized.
go right ahead, Dean.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I apologize, I wanted to get this question in earlier, but I don't know where the raise your hand function is on Zoom.
Well, for the record, Dean is the chair of the planning commission, that's why he gets.
Doesn't have to do it, yeah.
Yeah, gets to get into these conversations.
Yeah. Anyway, in looking this all over, there was a couple of other items that the planning commission had concerns on, which I did not see addressed in the report or on the site plans. And I'll just leave it for you guys to ponder. But we also addressed the issue that we talked about, maybe the possibility for adding outhouse porta potty facilities, as well as a trash container for trash removal. And I don't know if those were addressed by the applicant, and maybe I just missed it in the report, but those were two other items that we had talked about rather extensively at our planning commission meeting, and that's all I have. I thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks, Dean. I think, Kendra, do you have anything on that? I know that was something that I believe you and I spoke about briefly, or I had heard you speaking about briefly.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, the plans were not revised to add either of those, and in fairness to the applicant, the Planning Commission did have a discussion about that, but that was not part of their recommendation, because of course their recommendation was for denial. The applicant did speak at the Planning Commission about why they felt neither were necessary, so that is not part of the plan.
Gotcha, thank you.
Mr. Mayor? In the interim, since that planning commission session was heard, we did just adopt a trash handling ordinance that requires all waste generators to have pickup service. So I think it is perhaps unknown whether this would be considered a generator, but I think if we started to see debris in the area, it would probably be designated as such and would require trash service under existing ordinance.
Determine that?
I'd look at I'd have to clarify with the city attorney, but there is specific definition of what type of use required trash pickup or refuse
Gotcha.
pickup. So.
So if it becomes an issue, that's something to
Yes,
consider.
or we could certainly look at our nuisance ordinance as another way to enforce
Gotcha.
that. I think that likely would probably be the way that we'd move forward.
Gotcha.
Because I believe we did have resident feedback. There's a adjacent mini storage
In Medina.
in Medina, and the neighbor next door to that indicated they do see dumping problems.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
we would, I think as a council, want to preempt that. And I think the ordinances give us a way to do that, but we should discuss that and make sure we're all on board.
even think having trash facility on site could also facilitate garbage, because
Yeah.
if I had a shop that I was going to every day, instead of throwing it in my home garbage, I'd probably just take it to the shop and throw it in the garbage there. I'm sure a lot of small business owners do the same. These guys seem like they're pretty tight when it comes to, violations of tenants, and I can't imagine they'd want a nuisance violation on their hand. And anything other than nuisance violation right now, we would have to write into the conditional use. So,
That dumpster will be full every single day.
yeah, I'm sure. I'm
If
sure.
not like a
If not,
project that you just have the garbage and throw it in the.
in which case you have
Community dumpster. at the
trash
store.
blowing out of it, more than likely. I would probably tend to lean to not in that type of facility.
They talk about they're gonna have cameras, they're gonna have knowledge of who comes when and where, and I was okay with, they've got 3 other places that they've locked down pretty good, and it sounds like they've got some great tenants, and if they've got ones that aren't what they expect, they get them out. So,
The best code enforcers are your neighbors,
very much so.
so.
So then maybe we should think about a condition that they not allow trash to accumulate on the site. And if they can do that without trash service, great. If it becomes a problem, there's a mechanism in the approval to deal with it.
How would you, I agree with that. Is it covered already in our stuff, or would you suggest we write something into this specific approval?
I didn't notice anything that dealt with garbage. Maybe I missed it, if there is something. I would propose that we add a blank to the conditional use approval.
Well, I would imagine what our nuisance ordinance covers garbage on.
It does. And I'm looking at the recently adopted solid waste. It does say that each commercial, industrial generator they need to prevent that accumulation of trash. It doesn't say how that necessarily has to be, if it needs to be a service or who does that, but it's a requirement that you can't have that. And then Kendra might be able to speak a little bit more to the nuisance piece, but the nuisance ordinances do outline refuse and rubbish and all of those things, so there is a mechanism for that. Kendra, do you have anything to add on that portion?
No, I think you nailed it, Jessica. Our code enforcement language under the nuisance ordinance would prohibit trash from being on site.
So are you satisfied with that, Jeremy? Okay.
I am.
Then I guess the one other issue would be the restrooms, the porta potties, that's a concern for us. I'd probably kind of think a similar thing where, I don't know if it's necessarily needed. If it's there, I'm sure it'll be used, and then you have a porta potty, which isn't the best, most ideal thing to have down the road from you, I'm sure, but I don't know if it's needed.
Well, you're generating more traffic into the facility, right? Because you've got somebody coming in to clean it,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true.
and then you have people using it.
Right.
I mean, again, that's why my question was about the video cameras. If someone's out
Right.
behind the building going to the
Yeah.
bathroom,
Right.
more than likely they're gonna use their Mountain Dew bottle inside the facility when the garage door is closed, but,
That's a great picture to paint.
Experience.
it's canvas in my words. So, I don't see the need for it.
Gotcha. I think I agree.
One more question for staff. There is a condition that when municipal sewer and water comes in, that they have to connect to it. But because there isn't any water facility, there's not really anything to connect. So are we going to have a challenge assessing that charge if there's not any water consumption on site when that time comes?
That is a great question. I certainly could look into that with the city attorney, but that is a great question if there's no connection, whether or not we'd be able to. Unfortunately, I don't know the answer, but I can certainly look into that.
I'm assuming we'd be able to charge them a trunk charge.
Exactly. The language was written intentionally. We absolutely, and I have reviewed it with the attorney, can charge the trunk charge. We wouldn't be able to charge a connection fee if there wasn't a connection to the building, but they could be responsible for extending the stubs from the main to their project. So we have reviewed it. We're very comfortable with that language.
And the last thing I had was just about the landscaping that was mentioned a bit in the staff report. I believe it had to do with the number of trees on, maybe it was the north side, or the side with the retaining wall, and screening on that side. I don't know if we need to add anything in terms of conditions, or if we're comfortable with whatever review would be going in terms of the landscape plan. Does that make, do you know what I'm talking about, Kendra, or did I just completely?
No, but I'm looking quick.
Okay, gotcha. I think it was.
Wasn't there a question about credit for trees off-site or existing trees?
Yep, that was part of it.
And I can't remember where that landed. I guess my question would be, who would be, right now, if we have a development and they're required to plant a tree, they have to maintain that tree for a certain period.
Mm-hmm.
Would they still be required to maintain that on private property off-site?
Yeah, that was the question, is that the site, the applicant's required to provide 62 trees and 207 shrubs. And the plan does not comply. It shows 47 new trees and 207 shrubs, but includes 15 trees off-site. Those are the ones I pointed out. And there's nothing in our code that lets you give credit for existing trees or trees planted off-site. But certainly, I think planting those off-site certainly helps meet the council's intent about landscaping as a buffer and a transition. We, however, wrote the resolution to say you have to comply with the code and provide 62 trees on site. I did say in the staff report on page 9, I gave you some language. If you did want to give them credit for the off-site trees, you could change condition 6D of the resolution to require that they preserve the existing trees on the southeast property line, plant the 8 trees on the adjacent properties to the north, and install 54 new trees and 207 shrubs. Does that help, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, thank you. I'm just reading it real quick here.
That's 7D.
60, I think.
I'm looking at 2190. I must be looking at something else.
Oh, it might have changed. I'm sorry, you're correct. It is 7.
7D.
Oh,
Yeah.
you're right. It says, yep. Okay.
Don't ever doubt me.
So what is our thoughts on that? I tend to think that we want to make sure that we're screening it as much as possible.
To the north, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And since we don't have something in the code already about off-site credit, I would say we just stick to the code.
Were the properties to the north the properties that signed on in support?
I believe
Yes.
some of them, yeah.
Yeah, there is a number of them.
So, to me, if the affected properties, most affected properties are fine with what it was, I guess I'm fine with it, but
Excuse me.
if you want to be more restrictive, we definitely entertain that.
I like the more trees, the better. In my view, it kind of fits with the vision for the city. So
Right.
I would be happy to continue to hold the line on the requirements there.
There was one other part, Kendra, I think it's that following paragraph on 9 about the trees or shrubs planted on the side that has the retaining wall or not being planted in the plan, I guess? Is there anything we need to condition there to make sure that there is some landscaping to break that up? Or is it fine as is, that will be done with the landscape plan that's proposed?
We simply included a condition that they provide a detail so we can take a look at how they're going to be planting it. Trees on steep slopes have two major problems. They often don't get the root planted either deep enough or shallow enough and correctly in the dirt. And then more problematic is they aren't always staked properly so that they grow straight. And the reason that matters is if they don't have a strong root system, they're going to blow down and disappear. So I think we're okay. It's possible to do it. It just requires a landscaper who actually pays attention when they're installing the vegetation and ensuring that those stakes remain until the root is established.
Gotcha.
Can I ask a question of Kendra? Do we know where these existing trees are that they want to take credit for? And the reason I ask is if it's such that the spacing is that they have to cut down an existing tree just to plant one to satisfy code, then I think we're in a worse situation.
No, the trees they're talking about are on that southeast lot line, south lot line on the east half.
So all the plantings would be on the north?
Yeah, the trees we were just talking about are on the north, the off-site trees are on the north, and the trees on the steep slope are on the north.
Okay, so there's definitely room to add those additional trees then? Somewhere. We wouldn't be my question was, we wouldn't be cutting down existing trees to plant trees. Does that make sense?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Looking at the landscape plan, I think there's room on the west lot line to plant additional trees.
Which doesn't really screen anything.
No, but it meets the landscape requirements. I'd hate to see more on the north lot line because that's already a steep slope, but they could add some in there. They do have landscaping shown on the south lot line already, and because that's such a narrow space between the lot line and the pavement, they probably can't get a lot more in there. So the two options are the west lot line and the north lot line.
I mean, I guess if we were going to require more, I'd only want to require to the point where it goes to the north lot line and not to the west lot line. To me, forcing somebody to screen something that just goes to a vacant field doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Well, it's a vacant field today. It won't always be.
Right, but it'll probably be commercial or light industrial in the future. That's what it's zoned for. So we're just screening another commercial building.
I don't see a problem with that.
I've just heard from businesses in the past in the city that some of our landscape issues, while they sound good on paper, they just don't make sense from a business standpoint. So
Are you thinking there's some sort of condition we could add to just put that on the north side, or?
Well, I would, to me, it doesn't make sense to plant trees on the west side, to be honest with you. So if we're making them do trees, are we making them do trees just to meet the code, or are we making do those additional trees for the actual screening? And if we're doing it for screening to someone's benefit, it only makes sense to me to screen to the benefit of the north side and the east side property owners.
Yeah, I would think that makes the most sense to screen those two, yeah. So I would say if there's a way that we can emphasize that that's where we'd like that screening to go.
Yeah, it just might be that you can't fit 15 trees in that area. So then what?
How long's the line, the property line?
I don't think there's a number on this sheet here.
I can.
Looks like
Kendra,
about
you were saying you think
300 feet.
is
300 feet?
right?
north to south, based on the building size. That's a swag, but
I'll measure it. It's 194 yards on the north side.
You were thinking there is room for those trees to be planted?
Well, I think So the trees we're saying need to be planted are required by our minimum landscape standards. And so that is about a 340-foot west property line. There certainly is room there that you could plant them to meet our code requirements, or do some more staggered plantings or elsewhere on the site. It's not generally staff's role to redo the landscape plan for the applicant, but we are not trying to screen necessarily, we're simply trying to meet the minimum landscape requirements. But I am sympathetic to it being a tight site, because of the size of the buildings they've got on this site. They don't have a lot of room for landscaping. And that's why we did put that option in the staff report. If you don't think there's room to get all those trees on site, you could potentially give credit for the off-site trees, the 8 off-site trees to the north.
They for sure have enough room for
I think
trees.
so.
I have one of my lot lines is almost the same distance, and it's easy to,
Good enough.
it's easy to put that many trees on just the north side, let alone the east side.
Gotcha. That works for me. Okey-dokey. Anything else? Okay, then I will go ahead and entertain. So here, can we do this all at once? I think that's
I
quite a
think,
bit.
we would, if we could do them separately, that'd be great, just,
Okay.
Especially so we know whether we're approving or denying, on resolution 2021-94.
Oh,
We
yeah.
have 2
That's
options in the
right,
packet,
yep.
so as much as it's many motions.
Not a problem.
that'd be
I'll
great.
entertain a motion to adopt ordinance 2021-431, amending the zoning map.
I'll second, or
Or
I'll make the motion.
He already put,
He
I
did,
threw it out there.
he threw it out there. I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Perfect. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, entertain a motion to approve resolution 2021-94, approving the findings of fact for rezoning.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I'll entertain a motion to approve resolution 2021-95, approving the site plan and conditional use permit, 2021-96, approving the variance, and 2021-97, approving the preliminary plat. Okay, all right.
That's great.
so moved.
Second.
I want to discuss real quick. So we talked before, we want to have staff come back at the time of final plat with information on what it would take to resolve some of the water issues inherent in the site,
Yes.
correct?
Yep.
Does staff need any additional direction on that?
I think just consensus from council to bring that forward. We'd likely do that in between the approval tonight and time of final plat.
Do you think you would need funding to do any kind of
We
study?
likely will, so we will be
They'd come back with that.
coming back with a request of what that funding might look like for that.
Thank you.
And do we have consensus on that?
Yeah.
Yes.
And that is in this motion specifically, or is that in another?
I'm asking before I vote on the motion.
Yeah.
But it's not in the.
It's
motion.
Not specifically in it, but
In there,
just
but
kinda keep it.
with consensus from council, we could go ahead and
Add it.
bring that back to a future meeting of what that feasibility study would look like, so we can
So it'll be a
look at that project.
Caveat added later, but not part of this motion. Okay.
Okay, anything else? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Perfect, thank you, guys. I believe that got everything there, right? All righty. Thank you.
We actually, did I miss it? Did we approve the variance and preliminary plat?
Yes, the motion was to approve 95, 96, and 97.
Okay, I apologize. Thank you.
All right, we'll give everyone a minute to file out and then go on to 9B, which is the planned unit development amendment for Tavera.
Kendra, if you want to go ahead? I think we're ready.
Yes, this is back in front of you, Council. Lennar has requested approval of a PUD amendment for Tavera to allow Okay. To allow additional stockpiles in the southwest portion of the former Wessel property in their development. And you approved one stockpile as part of the original approvals, and now the request in front of you is for 4 stockpiles. Next slide. This is the entire Tavera project, and the area that we're talking about, the new stockpiles, is in the southeast corner. The approved stockpile is really just south, or just at Horseshoe, with the Horseshoe extension, yes, up just north of that. Next slide, just for context. So again, these images again show generally where the approved stockpile was and where the 4 new stockpiles are located, generally on the left, and on the right more specifically. The 3 on the bottom are just north of Horseshoe, and then the image on the upper right is a little bit harder to see, but that's sort of where the northern red arrow is on the image to the left. So it's a little bit separated from the other stockpiles. That was not on the original plan that you saw in September, but is something that has been added, so just to clarify that. Next slide. So staff has been working with Lennar. Their proposal is included in the packet. Staff is comfortable with the stockpiles for the reasons outlined in the report. Given you 2 options though. Option 1 is to approve the PUD amendment to allow the stockpiles. But option 2, certainly you have the ability to deny them. You have a fair amount of discretion with this request. But if you do recommend approval of the stockpiles, there are different ways that you could address the timing of the stockpile status. The approval as drafted limits those stockpiles to 20 feet and allows building permits for 2 model homes, but does not allow any other building permits until the stockpiles are moved and brought into compliance, or moved isn't the right word, but reduced and brought into compliance. And so that is one option, but in the staff report, we also noted that you could have other conditions. You could say no building permits, period, until the stockpiles are addressed. You could allow building permits to be issued while they're working on the amendments to those stockpiles to reduce the height, or again, this option for the 2 model homes until the stockpiles are addressed. And that is our recommendation. However, the denial resolution also has those similar kinds of limits that says if you have to completely remove the stockpiles, that you do have to, but we would allow 2 model home permits, but no other permits. So those are options, and both Kevin and Kent and I are here for questions, and I believe the applicant is online.
Perfect, thank you, Kendra. Any questions for any of them off the?
Yeah, how tall is the big pile now?
38 feet.
Oh, okay.
Something like that.
I have a question.
Go right ahead.
Was the option of moving the stockpiles that are out of compliance to the location where the in compliance stockpile is that a viable or non-viable option? Do we know?
I'm going to defer to engineering on that because I wasn't part of those conversations directly.
Are you referring to the one that was originally approved at final plat?
Yeah.
The stockpile, basically 66 extension?
Correct.
I think, I don't want to speak totally for the developer, but I think that area there might be a small amount that can go there, but they're pretty limited with any more they can add to that location. So I believe their plan is primarily to move it off-site for anything that is more than what's needed for the McCown piece.
Do we know what the limit is rooted in? Is it they don't own the land they would need to put it on, or are there other issues involved there?
I think it's just that it's, if they continue to add more to that stockpile, the height and size of that expands beyond an acceptable, likely acceptable solution. But I mean, like I said, there's probably some limited volume we could expand there, but I wouldn't want to, move the 38-foot stockpile and plop it on the one that exists up there now today. That would be too much for that location.
Yeah, I guess to go off yours, that's what I was wondering, is it limited by some type of watershed or some other approval? Or is it just limited by the desire and the cost? Because I don't know why they can't just expand the footprint of that existing pile.
Keep that 20-foot height, but expand the,
Right. Becomes
yeah.
4 times bigger in land size,
right, but it's one.
During the conversation too, the gentleman that was here talked about they were gonna come up 10 to 20% short on dirt with that northern parcel. And, so if they're gonna move some of this off to come into compliance, it just doesn't make any sense. I'm still miffed about how we came up with 38,000 extra square feet or 40, whatever these 4 dirt piles have accumulated. How we just feel we can just do that and ask for a change to the grading permit 8 to 10 months later. I'm still miffed about it, so.
I go back to, if this had been handled the way we said we wanted it handled, if they knew in September it was a problem, if they had contacted the city, and the city had gone through the review process, what would our recommendation, what would the recommendation of the council likely have been? I don't think council probably would have approved, 4 additional piles in the south end of the development. We probably would have been more eager to consider, okay, there's more than we thought, can we expand the original location, either at height or depth or width or some dimension? I would be open to that. I'm not really open to letting them stay where they are, because I feel like I don't want to be forced to do something I wouldn't have agreed to do willingly in the beginning by the circumstance and not being informed of the issue when it developed.
I'd be in support of that as long as we're not thinking it's going to run into any sort of water runoff issues or anything like that. But if it's not, I would 100% agree with what you're saying. I think that probably what we would have done. And it makes sense. It's a location that we initially approved. It's just bigger than what we initially approved, but, yeah. I think that makes sense. And I think we'd want to keep that 20-foot height, restriction.
Yeah, no more than 20.
No more than 20, and the dimensions obviously would get bigger, but, be condensing those 4 additional piles into the one longer pile. Thoughts on that?
No, I mean, I agree, it would have been something we would have probably considered in the first place.
Yeah.
You mean making the bigger,
Yeah, because
the middle pile bigger, rather than,
the approved pile, the pile
Yeah.
we originally approved,
yeah. Yeah, I'm struggling to see that there's significant amount of changes here. I think the issue was like that it's right next to the road and there are huge piles and
It's one of them, yeah.
it's smaller from a height perspective. I would really like, I don't know the reason. It bothers me that there's not a reason cited for why that big middle pile can't be bigger.
Do you want to ask the applicant? I think he's on.
Kevin, you said you didn't know why.
I mean, I think that area, I believe that they've essentially maxed out that area where the existing stockpile is. That's my gut feeling and from being on site.
Like the earth will collapse if
No, just that they've maxed it out in terms of, within the guidelines that we provided in this location at this height, making sure it drains right. So, you know, they could certainly bring more material there. It just, the where it would probably end up going up a little bit more. So if you guys were okay expanding the height a little bit, I think they could certainly put it there. I think they've basically maxed out the area that kind of holds where it fits in, where we're not getting complaints. I think if we move the 4 stockpiles on the south end and we put them anywhere, if we add them to that existing pile, I think
I thought we said
sensitive.
I thought we said we could go higher there if they needed the storage. Like if you're gonna need more storage, store it interior and higher. Or are we not?
That's certainly a spot it can go. Yeah, we've been working off of that 20-foot, this is the general area guidelines, so if that's amenable, or if that's the preference, we could let the developer speak to that. I think that would be, we'd have to be aware of that, because I do think it would elevate it a little bit more. Now, that's a lot better spot to have a stockpile of, you know, I would agree with the council on that, but it would just, we'd have to be aware of that. There would likely be a height elevation increase.
I guess I'm a little confused as to why that would be necessary if we'd, you know, they'd obviously be allowed to have a longer pile and a wider pile. I don't know why the height would have to go up.
I think we would do everything we could to not have the height go up, but I don't think all that dirt would fit there. I mean, you know, you could say, you know, we'll allow you to maximize that area to the extent possible. I don't know what that volume is, if that could all fit there, but that's certainly another spot that we could designate, or, you know, direction we could provide the developer.
If we gave flexibility on the footprint of that approved stockpile, is there some constraint that would prevent all of the excess dirt from going there? At the 20-foot height?
I don't know, because I don't have the numbers. My gut tells me that that it wouldn't be all the material, so they'd have to haul the rest of it up to a different location. And I don't know the total volumes and how they balance, but I don't think they could keep all of it there, would be my suspicion. Beyond that, they'd have to run numbers and do some survey work to be able to determine that. I don't know if they've done that or not, if Paul wants to chime in.
Paul, go ahead.
Sure. Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. So just to explain a little bit about what we did do, and looking at the stockpiles a little bit in more detail, we did a little bit more earthwork estimation and some more studies, which we did send to Kevin as they were kind of being prepared. And we know that we need roughly 34 to 35,000 cubic yards of dirt for the McCown property. I heard the question asked, what's preventing, or, you know, what's the reasoning for having that there? And it's essentially, it's basically piling it there so that we can grade that piece next year. If we're made to haul it back to the north and then bring it back, it's just a really inefficient use of equipment, material, and everything else. The other thing is, right now, what we're trying to do is stage the material appropriately, because we're working on the 3rd edition and 4th edition final plats. So 3rd edition is already into the city, and that's going to be the area of the townhomes down along Hackamore, and 4th edition is going to be the area to the north of the Parkway. So we recognize that there's a problem. We recognize that the soils turned out to be a lot more difficult to deal with. And I had tried to explain all that a couple of weeks ago and previous to that. But the main reason is we're trying to put ourselves in the position to where it's time to grade the McCown piece, or when it's time to go north, we have the fill that we need. And unfortunately, we started in the area of the site that's high or long. So that's the primary reason. So what we're trying to do is, in working with staff, and looking back at the approvals, knocking those stockpiles down to 20 feet, and then hauling off a portion of it on the south side from that largest pile to the south there to move it back and knock it down, so that we can use that material at other sites that we're trying to finish up fall grading on now. But that's the primary reason, is that we're trying to take into the account that we're on the hook for a 551 unit community, and this is just a piece of it. And so while we do realize that it's an inconvenience, we're trying to put ourselves in a position to get it done, get our watershed approvals, and work diligently through the winter and be able to go in the spring and take care of everything kind of all at once. And I think that had come up at the last meeting was, well, why can't they just grade the whole site? And we're trying to do that so that when it's time to go in the springtime, we're able to do that as quickly and efficiently as possible. Instead of hauling all of those stockpiles back to the north and then trucking them back down to the south, with first and second edition going in, and maybe even having to, go around and go down 116 or down Hackamore. So that's a long answer to your short question, but there's a lot of factors that go into this. So I hope that kind of helps explain a little bit of it.
So Paul, if I heard you right, the northern middle stockpile is capable of holding all the dirt. It's just you want to bring that dirt back down south later. Is that correct?
We would need it back down south later, yeah. So we're basically trucking it all up north, only to truck it back south once we use it, right through the middle of first and second edition, which are going to be under development. And if there's an issue where we can't get through on site, we have to go off site, bring it down 116, and then down Hackamore back to be able to fill in McCown, because that McCown piece is low or short on material. So there's a whole host of variables that are in play, but we're completely aware of the situation. We know the council's preference on it, and we have been actually trying to time it just right with a couple of our jobs in the northwest quadrant to pull some of that material off site. In my email that I sent to Kevin last week, I think what we're guesstimating on a couple other jobs is between 5,000 and 10,000 cubic yards. So once we're able to move that off site, we can knock the piles down, especially the two along Hackamore, bring those down from, the 30, 35 feet that they are down to 20. But anymore, if we move any more than that, it really becomes a pretty inefficient use of material and equipment and resources, and it ends up, it'll take longer to haul it back south and then bring it back to where it needs to go when we open up more of the grading area next year.
I think the thing that stands out to me is just the location right off Hackamore to me is not, I'm not comfortable with that. Those three really, but two for sure, piles right off Hackamore that are 50 feet off or whatever it is, that's too close to me.
The efficiency argument would be more persuasive to me if we had heard it in September.
Yeah.
Or sooner.
Yeah.
It's just this much dirt. I still, if I remember right, my daughter and wife do a lot with the horses and over at Trail Dusters and stuff. I think a few of their events, late spring, early summer, the pile started then. So the next time something like this happens, we need a quicker response to the city on the needs of Lennar. I still am, somebody made a comment, it would save about $1 million if you didn't have to move this dirt, and
That was off-site, I think, moving it off-site.
but it's moving it, even on-site or off-site, it's gonna cost money, and I really don't wanna roll over and just let it happen again. But that's me. I'm listening with an open mind.
I agree, Dean. Kind of on a side to that, I think this is something that I'd spoken to Brad about a little bit. Requiring some sort of status report, I think, on future phases and applications on their grading stockpile, I think is something we should be adding in for all future, and maybe that's what we want to include in general as a policy.
But why would we, the issue with that is we already have established our expectations. If they are not meeting our expectations, they need to let us know. We don't need to require a status report for any specific thing, I would say.
Yeah.
Because as soon as they are not meeting our expectations, we should be having a conversation. So like, implied in having a standard is that we have that standard and you maintain it.
Right.
If we start to set reporting requirements for when you're not in standard for having piles of dirt, it almost implies that the other standards are not as important. Like, you gotta meet all of the standards, and it's, the onus is on you that if you're not meeting them, then you need to let us know, which is,
As soon as possible.
yeah, so like, we are, once you establish a rule, you don't need to say, it's like if we had a speed limit in our town, we wouldn't need to have, we wouldn't be comforted in the notion that people aren't speeding if we required people to call our police department if they're exceeding the speed limit.
Right, okay.
Just to let you know, I'm driving 57. Like, implied in having an expectation is that if you're not, that you are expected to meet that expectation.
Right, yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, you gotta let us know.
The other thing that bothers me is was my first council meeting, and that's over a month now, and nothing has been moved or changed on these dirt piles. We're coming up to chilly time of the year. Is it gonna be delayed now? If things freeze up and stuff, how are they gonna move the dirt?
Well, if it's as
And
is,
then we're stuck. And
if it's as is, it's not, I mean, we're not changing,
Are they still 50, are they still as high as they were?
they're very high.
I didn't drive by it. I would have assumed, like, they know that that the council is upset about these tall.
You would think, yeah.
Can I just ask a question of the council?
Sure.
What I'm hearing with the undertones is like, do you think that it has been mine or Lennar's intention to purposely get the council irritated with us, like on purpose? I'm just asking the question, because it seems like.
I'll speak to it. I hear and I see things that have happened in the Lennar projects. Recent drive-bys, which I do, through the Lennar project in Ravinia. Building materials on sidewalks and sticking out into the roads. Sod was dropped off sometime, I believe, Friday, and I think I counted in the excess of 20 pallets of sod sitting in the road or on the sidewalk. I don't think that's something that we want. There are movable dumpsters sitting on the road, and if we had any type of snow right now, we would,
We're not required to plow that.
if we're not required to plow it, so be it, but do we allow anybody putting dumpsters on city roads?
But the road's not dedicated, that's the difference.
It's-
It's their responsibility to plow those roads until the road's dedicated, in which point.
But if it's
development's
labeled
done.
with street signs and
Doesn't
stuff,
matter.
it's still not open. Thank you for that
I think-
clarification.
And I think the dumpsters are in active construction zones. They're not just placed throughout the neighborhood. They're in places where homes are being constructed.
But
But
again, I didn't know that, that clarity is there. Yes, no, I don't believe you're doing this to irritate the city council, the mayor, or our administration. I mean, Kendra spoke to me a long time ago on the planning commission, is all of these things that are written up in all of our documents is what the developer says they're going to do. And this is just where I think the original estimate was 38,000 cubic yards. And we're at, if the numbers were right back in late September at my first council meeting, you guys were, the conversation was it was about 45,000 extra cubic yards. That's way over double. That's over 100% wrong. And I got on a soapbox about soil borings and stuff should have been done better. I heard comments, dirt is not a science. It's not an engineering deal, and I disagree with it. I believe engineers are a lot more exact, and And real than to be that much off. And that's what's bothered me the most, and to start piling this in late spring, early summer, and then coming and talking to the city in September, that's a huge variance. And it's irritating, so.
I hear your irritation, and Councilor Behrenkamp, I'd like to speak with you a little bit more offline, and maybe I can offer a little bit more insight on some of the things that have kind of occurred this year, and hopefully we can come to an understanding on a few of those things. Regarding the soil issue, it is very unpredictable. I don't want to rehash old stuff. What we're trying to do is acknowledge the problem, bring it down so it's not as much of a issue to the council from a height standpoint, and be able to utilize it as quickly as we possibly can.
If I can jump in real quick.
And then, actually, Ellen has something real quick, and then
Go ahead.
jump to you, Dean, after that.
Yep.
I'd actually like to make a motion approving the amendment with a change to item 4, changing it to item number 1 on page 3 of the staff report. No building permit shall be issued for the project until stockpiles are moved as directed by council.
So
Okay, hold on, Paul.
Well, actually, it wouldn't be as directed. Basically not allowing building permits until 3 items above are in compliance.
Okay.
So you're allowing additional piles not to exceed 20 feet. Capacity of stockpiles must be maximized from north to south, but no building permits until that time. So they can choose how fast they want to move, and they can leave the piles there. It's up to them to do it.
So for clarity on that one.
Paul, we'll let you know when we're done talking.
I'll second.
Does that make sense from a staff
Yeah,
perspective?
so you're saying, you're recommending us continuing with the current conditions 1, 2, and 3, and changing condition number 4 to the third enforcement compliance option that we provided in the staff report that says allowing building permits to be, no building permits will be issued, changing it to number 1. Correct?
Yeah.
You want it to be.
But the
no-
directed part is basically out, because the direction is the first 1 through 3. Right?
You,
I'm not for the model homes.
you do not want the model homes, but, so it would be no building permits will be issued until the stockpiles are moved as directed by council?
Well, the direction is 1, 2, and 3, so I don't even know if you need to have as directed.
Yeah, I think it keeps
Okay.
saying, these are 3 directions to
Okay.
you. This is what we want, and then this is.
Okay, that's fine, and they can do whatever they want with them. They can leave them on site and bring them down to the 20 feet and regrade and do whatever they need to bring it in compliance.
I'm sorry, are we talking about the first resolution in the packet where we would approve the additional 4 piles, or the second resolution that does not allow the 4 piles?
No, I'm saying, go ahead and approve it with a maximum of 20 feet, so they'd have to knock the pile down, right? The existing piles that are there. But we don't allow them to do any building permits, even model homes.
Till it's done.
And does that have that north-south
Yep.
reference in there, so the
So
bigger
it
one
would be
to the north?
these smaller piles here, it would transition to having bigger piles here.
You're just saying they need to get some stuff done
No,
and then come and
it
ask
would-
later for.
The bigger piles would be farther north.
Right,
Yes, that's
they
what I'm
can
saying.
grade it
If
whatever
for
they
the
want.
bigger piles.
Gotcha.
If they need to leave those
These are-
small
Smallest
piles there,
pile,
they're
whatever,
smaller.
Further
reduced
south.
to would be.
Yeah.
They're gonna work to resolve it, and they're gonna accelerate their grading and whatever they need to do, because they want the building permits, that's the ultimate goal. I think you gotta have a stick to it.
I agree with that part of it. I don't necessarily agree with allowing the 4 stockpiles on the south side.
Well, I guess my question is what's a stockpile versus what's a pile of dirt you're actively working on? Is there a definition to that?
Kevin, do you have any thoughts on that? Kevin, are you with us? Maybe.
I am, sorry about that, I was looking up something and couldn't log back in. I think we would use, exercise our judgment on evaluating, what they have for their grading plan versus what's out there. So I don't know if there's a definition that I could create for you tonight, but we basically would reference, what they have compared to what we approved. So, I would say that would stand out pretty obvious in the field. So I don't have a verbatim language we could have. I think we got to rely on our engineering team out there to manage that. And I think industry, I hate the term industry standard, but we'd have to just navigate that in the field, in my professional opinion, if that makes sense.
It does, I think, thank you. I would maybe propose adding some language to, they say it's should be used during 2022. I'd say maybe we review it at first October meeting 2022. If it's either already in compliance and they're gone, or, we can tell that they've been actively making work and there's just a little bit left and we can tell where it's gonna go, fine. If it's a huge problem, then as of that October 1st meeting, we set a date, say November, where that has to be hauled off-site at that point.
So you're basically saying reassess what the piles are, and at that point, consider allowing building permits?
No, so this would be, they get into compliance with what was discussed with the north-south, with the 20 feet, with all the stuff that we've been talking about in this proposal.
We issue them building permits.
We hold building permits until they get into that compliance.
Right.
And then we make sure that, as they say, the dirt will be used in 2022 so that it doesn't bleed into 2023 or longer. That way, I picked October because that way we're getting in hopefully early enough where it's not going to be frozen and a foot of snow or 10 feet of snow or whatever, by the time we could potentially be requiring them to haul the rest of that out. But hopefully it's not an issue. My thoughts on that.
Yeah. Kendra, do you have any thoughts on how we could allow some a change like that where we'd require reassessment? Is that something that we could do with this?
I think you certainly, I think it'll become a non-issue because we have an application for the 3rd edition that's in, and I think, as Paul said, the 4th edition is probably coming in, and it's going to use those dirt piles. But I think you absolutely could include a condition that said the approval is valid until October 2022. The applicant must return to the council and ask for an extension of the stockpiles prior to October 1st, 2022, if the stockpiles need to remain beyond that date, something like that.
In saying that, are you saying the motion is approving 1, 2, and 3 and leaving number 4 off the motion?
Well, we'd have to add 4, but
Yeah.
it would be amended.
Yeah. So, Kendra, if.
What?
Maybe I misunderstood. I thought we were looking at approving the resolution with the 4 conditions, item number 4 being modified per Councilmember Schultz's comments, and adding a condition 5 that says the stockpiles are approved through October 1st, 2022, unless an extension is granted by the council prior to that date.
What's your modification to number 4, Alan?
Well, you're basically taking away the 2 model homes.
Oh, yeah.
So, once they come in compliance with 1, 2, and 3, we could start issuing building permits.
Then they can come in and ask for a
And then,
building permit, right?
as the mayor said, we'll
Okay.
reassess it with item 5,
Yes.
if we want to drop it all.
So you're suggesting we take the 2 model homes out
Yep.
of 4, and then 5th would be reassessed in a year if the bounds haven't gone away.
Right.
Okay.
And
I like the time limit. To Kendra's point, I don't think it's necessarily going to come into force, hopefully.
not.
But I like that we're thinking that way. I like the withholding all building permits and not just the model homes, but I still feel like we are accepting something that we would not have accepted had this been handled the way we want it handled in the future.
That's probably true, but I think this will send a message to,
And if I can jump in real quick to the comment of, is Lennar trying to make the council mad? Developers are making the residents angry, and we are the representatives of the residents, not just because this has happened. There's a lot of growth happening, a lot of things happening. Lennar is one of the big players. I can speak to some of the other ones. Lennar is not the only one that is violating things or doing things that they're not supposed to be doing. The others are doing it, and we will hold them accountable also, but it's gotta stop. We've gotta work together to build a great community. Ravinia is a pretty decent neighborhood, but the headaches that I saw this council, the mayor, and the residents around the Ravinia project just being dished or not listened to or delayed, response times and stuff, it should be extremely quick. The builders should be cleaning up on a nightly basis, not when there's a complaint. There should be a lot more control out there than what there is. And, again, since I last talked about this in the end of September, Lennar is a nationwide company, and I would expect a wee bit better guesses and stuff than being this far off. And a quicker response time to city staff, they would bring it very quickly to our mayor and our council here, and we could respond very, very quickly to your needs. So
if Lennar wants to get a permit for the houses, model homes, they gotta move the dirt.
Yep.
at least have to get it down
But
to
this-
20 feet.
Yeah.
This doesn't call for a whole lot of movement, though, right? Because you're approving all 4 stockpiles, we've got to get them down to 20 feet, but everything else is fine.
Then the north-south, so it'd
Yeah.
be moving the biggest piles north of north of where those 2 ones are now to Hackamore, the smallest piles closer to Hackamore, which I think is preferable.
Yeah, it's not, I don't know if I would a 20 feet tall pile of dirt is much less obscene than a 38
Yeah.
foot pile of dirt. And just with the ratio of height, you know, that means that that hill is going to be spread out more, is further, so I don't know if I would have necessarily said no to 20 feet piles of dirt, but.
I probably wouldn't have if it would have came to us a lot quicker.
Yeah, so I think we're punitive, or we can't be so punitive, but we can be punitive as far as, or make adaptations based on some things. But I don't know if we need to take every sin that Lennar has committed and just pile it all into this particular
Yeah.
issue. But I think all they have to do is get in compliance and then they'll get their permits.
Right.
Probably. I guess they'll put,
And then we'll
can't
have
say
that
for sure, but
separate review at the end
that's how
of
it goes.
the year. And I'm comfortable with that. I see what you're saying, Jeremy. I think the north-south thing makes a big difference to me, because it's pushing it off of Hackamore.
Are we including the middle green flagged location in that north to south distribution?
That's
Well, we're talking about the
Pile,
piles, right?
I think-
Where they're taking from? They're taking from the south pile first.
Kevin, do you have or Kendra, thoughts on whether or not the green pile that's listed would have to be the biggest, or was it talking about the 3 piles near the south that would be rearranged, so the biggest would be, of the 3 would be on top, or on the north end?
I'll jump in. I think this references 4 additional stockpiles, so how I would interpret it as written would be that it would not include the green one. I think that would have to be amended. So it would be the 4 new stockpiles are what's in this PUD amendment. Do you concur with that, Kendra?
Yeah, I thought that was your intent, Kevin, when you gave us this language, so.
Yep.
I think the 4 new stockpiles.
So you need to do a friendly amendment to get number 5 in, don't you?
Yeah, can I do a friendly amendment to my second, and